Hey folks, tēnā koutou katoa.
What do you make of? Oh, hi. What do you make of the situation in terms of the ceasefire? We've got Donald Trump saying that there is one. We've got Iranian foreign minister saying there's not. Do you have any briefings as to what's going on?
Well, there's often a lot of fog and war. However, we've said we need dialogue and de-escalation, and we're a lot closer to that than we were 24 hours ago. New Zealand's message to the world is always that peace is better than war, and I hope that that's where the two parties are going.
But do you have any idea as to if there is a ceasefire or if there is not a ceasefire?
I can't tell you anything more than what you can already hear from the international parties, Israel, United States and Iran. But if we get that sort of information and we're able to share it, we certainly will.
Does New Zealand condemn Iran's attacks on US bases in Qatar?
Look, we have said to all parties it's better to have dialogue and de-escalation than to use violence. So yes, we think that it is wrong to be attacking anybody. However, we recognise that this is a situation which has been brewing for a long time, and what's more important is to focus on where we go next.
There's a protest outside with people saying that the government should have taken a stronger stance on the US bombing of Iran, saying the US wasn't under attack. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, we acknowledge the United States have said that they've responded legally. This is collective defence in their view. We acknowledge that. We don't take a view on it. What we do believe is that rather than New Zealand rushing to judgment as they would like us to, we're far better to keep our counsel, assemble the facts and recognise that there's no premium on New Zealand arriving at a quick response. What is important is that we uphold our reputation internationally as an honest broker.
Have you spoken to Prime
on whether it was illegal?
Beg your pardon?
Have you had any advice on whether the US attack was legal?
Well, we've had a lot of advice over the last 48 hours. It's commented on a variety of angles, but I mean, in terms of are we getting a legal opinion on it, no, not at this point.
Have you spoken to Prime Minister Chris Luxon about the developments?
No, I haven't spoken directly to him, but both of us are speaking to officials all the time.
Does the regulatory standards bill allow corporations to seek compensation if their property rights are affected in any way?
No, the regulatory standards bill is very clear. It requires makers of laws to be transparent to Parliament what their law does and who it affects, but it is also explicit that the regulatory standards bill, I think at clause 24, says that it does not give anybody any additional legal rights. The people that are saying that are either not capable of understanding what the law is about, or worse, are deliberately making mischief. What we need in this country is open and honest dialogue about how we get better laws with less red tape. What that really means, a stable regulatory environment, more investment. That could be another IKEA, another Costco, another supermarket chain, so that people can actually afford more stuff. People muddying the water with misinformation is not helping at all.
Willie Jackson says he doesn't acknowledge, believe or trust that section of the legislation. What do you make of that?
Well, thankfully it's not up to Willie Jackson to interpret the law, it's up to the courts, and I suspect that when they see in black and white there are no additional legal rights, the purpose of this law is to increase transparency to Parliament. That's what they will take it. The good news is I don't think Willie Jackson's going to become a judge anytime soon.
What about the concern that the legislation might create an indirect effect where it signals to the court that you need to take account of these principles?
Well, again, the legislation has been set out very clearly in its purpose statement. We've taken advice about the likely interpretation by the courts, and we're very satisfied that this is going to be a very strong guide to people making laws, but the accountability mechanism is through Parliament, and because the people elect the Parliament, it actually strengthens democracy. What weakens democracy is when people who should know better go outside their area of academic expertise, talk about bills that they apparently don't understand, or just plain misinform people, or go out and run campaigns that are really designed to rile up their members rather than seek a better truth.
Do you think would that outcome that James just outlined be a good or bad thing for him if the court would interpret it that way?
Well, it's certainly part of the purpose of the legislation is to make a statement that we should not take away people's property rights unless there's a very good reason or they're compensated. Now, that actually goes back through hundreds of years of common law. It was established by the Regulatory Standards Task Force that drafted the bill. It's formally appeared in the legislative guidelines that guide New Zealand. None of this stuff is new. It's actually been around for a long time.
Do you think enough is being done by the Parliamentary Service and other agencies to deal with online abuse of MPs?
Look, I see it, directed at some of my fellow MPs. Sadly, it tends to be directed disproportionately at the female members of ACT's team. I think it's a real problem. I'm not sure that the Parliamentary Service is really the right agency to address it, for the simple reason that if it's their responsibility to address it, they're going to need to have some control over how MPs use the internet, and that's the last thing I would ever accept.
So you wouldn't want them to have a role in, say, monitoring social media to look for threats against MPs? Do you think that's...
Oh, well, if it's a question of seeking out people who are making explicit threats, sure. Sorry, I thought you were suggesting some sort of, censorship or monitoring of the MP's activity. But if you want to talk about looking for people that are making explicit threats and alerting security, then that's what they should be doing.
What do you make of What do you make of Paul Goldsmith's comments this morning as Treaty Negotiations Minister that basically progressing settlements with iwi, the amount of time and money spent on that can't go on forever, it can't be open-ended?
Well, that's not a new position. I mean, as far back as 2008, I think it was the Helen Clark government set a time limit on treaty settlements. So we've had that position across successive governments for, 17 years. The question is, how do we fully and finally settle the remaining treaty settlements, such as with Ngāpuhi, and that's something this government's putting a lot of effort into.
Do you think that there needs to be a timeline put on Ngāpuhi so they know what they're working towards and basically say, at this point you guys have to have got around the table and we have to have come to a decision, or that's it?
Well, that's ultimately up to the Minister, Paul Goldsmith, but I would certainly support that. At the end of the day, we're talking about things that happened in the past. No new facts are going to come to light. What we do need is to get to a resolution. And I'll tell you why it matters, because there's so many young New Zealanders in Northland who need a better way forward. And one of the things that would really do a lot for them, as you've seen with Tainui, you've seen with Ngāi Tahu, if Ngāpuhi had a settlement, I think we'd be in a much better place.
How many years is reasonable on that then?
Well, I'm not going to get into spitballing a number of years, but the idea
of... Are we talking like a decade, or are we talking like actually in 2 years' time it should all be done and dusted?
Well, if it could be done in 2 years' time, that'd be fantastic, but I don't want to start putting a time limit on people who...
Is a decade too long?
Well, I would say that a decade was too long, but I don't want to start putting a time limit on people who are much closer to the complexity of it than I am. Right, thank you very much, folks. Have a good day.
Thank you.